One of the most commonly underprepared and injured joints in bodyweight training is the wrist. Our wrists weren't meant to resist large forces, especially at disadvantaged angles, such as doing floor movements, where our hands form a 90-degree angle with our forearm, or in even more advanced exercises where our wrists reach even smaller angles. One might say that these tight angle movements are dangerous as our wrists are naturally weak in these positions and can lead to injuries, but this is exactly why we should build strength in these ranges. Injuries occur due to an unprepared body and mind and happen when you overstep your limits too quickly, such as attempting an intense movement without training or not allowing enough time for preparation and recovery. When I first started calisthenics, resources online rarely mentioned the importance of wrist safety, and I ended up experiencing a lot of strains and overuse injuries as I didn't spend any time stretching and conditioning my wrists. In this video, I'm going to explain all the exercises I do to prevent pain and injuries in my wrists and forearms. Some of these exercises are quite intense, so stick to the ones where you feel just a slight bit of discomfort, but not pain. If you are currently dealing with an injury, please seek a medical professional before trying any of these drills. The first step in my routine is to warm up my wrists. The goal here is to simply practice movement. Loosen your joints with some wrist rotations and then try moving through the farthest ends of your range of motion without any assistance. Remember that all strength is preceded by mobility. If you can't move your muscles and joints through a range of motion, then you won't be able to build strength there. Once my wrist and forearm muscles feel mobilized, I'll do some light dynamic stretching to increase my range of motion a little more. You want to stretch your wrists in two ways, palms up and palms down. Lock out your arms, turn them bit by bit towards the end of your rotational mobility, and gradually increasing pressure with each set. I usually run these back and forth and also incorporate a little bit of a circular dynamic stretch in each position. Keep in mind that in the warm-up phase, you should never hold any stretches as it might decrease your muscular elasticity and strength temporarily. Next, you want to apply pressure on the heel of your palm, have your knees on the ground to keep the pressure light, and you want to gently pulse through the end of your mobility to the point where you again feel a bit of discomfort but not pain. Like I said before, you always want to keep moving through these stretches, whether it be with pulses or circles. In addition to the stretch, you want to use your joints and muscles in this new position by lightly pushing your fingers. This sends a signal to your brain that you actually need this range of motion, and you're more likely to keep your newly attained flexibility through adaptation. If you simply just stretch without doing anything else and force through a stretch, you're less likely to actually keep this mobility and you'll end up stretching forever without making progress. Now, doing the same with your palms facing up and the back of your hand on the ground, you can again pulse through your ranges of motion and try to experiment with rotating your wrists. Now, when your palms are facing up, a great way to, again, keep your mobility is to open and close your fingers in this stretched range. Start in a comfortable range first and slowly decrease the angle between your hand and your forearm over time, as this might be quite intense for beginners. Now, the last bit of mobilization I would do is for wrist deviation. I perform some wrist rolls on my fists, again, staying in a range where I feel a good stretch, but not necessarily pain, and I rock back and forth while applying a good amount of pressure on my fists. Now that our wrists are mobilized, we can start building strength by pushing from these bent angles with added resistance. Place your palms down again and push up with your wrists carefully so that you are only resting on your fingers. Think about it like a calf raise, but with your arms, where you want to pause at the top and lower down through the eccentric portion, slow and controlled. To strengthen all directions, you can rotate your wrists around and perform the same movement. You can always increase the difficulty by either tightening the wrist angle with the ground and doing push-ups from here, or you can move your knees back to increase the weight on your wrists. You want to stay in a difficulty where you can do at least 8 to 10 reps without pain. With any of these pushing wrist exercises, you can think about it like relearning the push-up. You want to start with your knees close, or if you can't do that, you can try doing wrist push-ups against a wall or an elevated surface, and over time, go through the progressions of a normal push-up to increase the amount of stress on your wrists. You can also do push-ups with the back of your palm on the ground, but this is usually a lot more intense than the palms down variation. Feel free to use as much assistance as you need, but make sure that you are increasing the difficulty over time. Now to strengthen your wrist deviation, I usually use my parallel bars to rip out these wrist presses, but you can also use a long stick or resistance bands. Make sure you are getting both the ulnar and radial deviation with these, and you can adjust the difficulty by changing the location in which you hold the bar. Another wrist deviation exercise I do is on push-up bars or parallettes, where I slightly widen my grip and try to press down with my wrist to lift up the ends of the bars. This adds an element of instability, and this requires much more control than the other exercises, so I wouldn't do these if you're a complete beginner. Over time, move your wrists farther apart to condition the tighter wrist angles. You can also do any of these exercises with your thumbs out and in line with the bar, which gives you a slightly more intense stretch through your thumbs. You can also increase the general stability of your wrists by doing fingertip holds or fingertip push-ups. As your wrists are now elevated, they will adapt to become more stable as your fingers are holding your body up. Now, an important tip for anything with fingertip work, you want to make sure your knuckles do not sink in, as this puts an extreme stress on your finger joints. So make sure that your fingers are below your knuckles and are closer to being vertical than being horizontal. For general grip strength training, one of the best exercises you can do is the dead hang. To level this up even further, you can try fingertip dead hangs, or if you can hit at least a minute comfortably of dead hangs, then you can try some weight transfers and eventually proceed to one-arm hangs. Now the final and most difficult exercise I do to condition my wrists is the false grip. In this, you are gripping while your forearm is flexed at a 90-degree angle or even less. So before trying this grip, make sure you can comfortably do the palms up wrist stretch that I mentioned before in a tight angle, as well as be able to open and close your fingers fully. If you can't do the stretch comfortably, do not attempt this exercise. It's not for beginners. Now start by practicing the form without any resistance by wrapping your palms behind the bar, bending your wrist, and externally rotating your elbow. You want the bone on the bottom of your palm along the pinky side of your hand to hook around the bar. This might be a little bit painful on your wrist bones as well, so if you find that this is limiting your progress, you can invest in some wrist wraps to cushion your wrists against the bar. Once you're comfortable with the wrist placement, progressively increase the difficulty as if you were relearning pull-ups. Try it first on a low bar with feet support, and then progress on to doing rows with a false grip, and then eventually hangs, and eventually pull-ups. Now this is incredibly stressful on your wrists, so make sure that you're listening to your body. Stop when you feel any intense or sharp pains. Now the false grip can take up to weeks or months to master, but it's worth training for if you're looking to level up your grip strength and train for harder skills in the future. Now you can practice the wrist mobility exercises every day, which are in the first half of the video, especially if you find that you have low wrist mobility. Light stretching won't cause too much fatigue, so you can train them more often. However, with the strengthening exercises in the later half of the video, these should be trained and properly rested just like any other muscle group, and I recommend just throwing in 2 or 3 sets of these after your working sets during your training days. At the end of the day, even spending a couple minutes before and after your workouts to prepare and recover your wrists can significantly decrease your chances of picking up injuries that can take you out for weeks or months at a time. I hope you found this video useful, and I hope your training journey is full of gains and void of injuries. Peace.